Okay, now that we've covered which realm you're going to select, we'll look at which character you need to create. So you go to create a new character. First thing to look at is whether or not you want to be Alliance or Horde. Now, one thing to note, Alliance and Horde are enemies. This game carries on from previous books and previous games where Horde and Alliance are at war. So I'll just have a look what Horde has to offer. So the first race available is Orc, or you can also select Undead. Look how freaky looking he is. That's so cool. I love them. They're great. You can choose also Tauren or Troll, and last but not least, Blood Elf. Now I also like Blood Elf. They're pretty cool. Under Alliance, you could choose Draenei. While I've got this guy up, I'll just show you a few different classes you can play. The first one, the one we already have selected, is Warrior. Now something I am going to cover later on is specs, but each class you choose, you get 3 different possibilities on how you're going to spec. So that influences the outcome of your game and your play style. So really up to the individual player on what you want to do. But under a Warrior, you can either be a tank or damage per second, or DPS as it's known. Now, the main goal of a tank, when you're in a group or a group quest, or you're also raiding or in an instance or dungeon, the tank's job is to take all the aggravation from the monsters. Monsters are also known as mobs. So they're there, they're heavily armoured usually, and they just need to take as much damage as possible without dying. That's the main goal of a tank. The damage per second part, if you want to go damage per second instead of tank, the main goal of damage per second is to damage the mobs as much as possible and basically kill them before the tank dies. Then we also have a look at a different class here. You could choose Priest. Now Priest can either be healers or damage per second. If you choose to be a healer, your job is going to be to keep your tank alive when you're in a group. Your tank dies, the whole party dies, it's a disaster. If there's a damage per second player that manages to somehow get a monster or a mob attacking them, you also need to keep that player alive. If it all goes wrong, you get blamed and it's not very fun. Okay, there we go. Or you can also choose Shaman. Pretty much the same concept, damage per second, or you can be a healer, completely up to you. Now the cool thing about Shamans is throughout the game you eventually start getting totems, and which can replenish your mana and health of you and your party members, but again we'll cover that one later. The next on this list is Mage. Now Mage are mainly just damage per second. They can pack quite a punch, but on the downside they also go down really quickly when they start taking damage. So probably not the best class to choose to start with, but if you like the idea of being a spellcaster, then go for a mage, they're great. The other benefit of playing a mage is you can port to any city once you learn how to. And also if you're in a party, you can port your party members to that city, which you're always in demand, and later on you could sell the ports and make a little bit of gold there. Okay. Now we also have Death Knight. Now to start with, you more than likely are not going to be able to play a Death Knight. When you can, you'll find they're a lot of fun. They can be what we consider overpowered, too easy to play, which may change from time to time depending on what patches come out in the future. But that's your Death Knight. Now the next race of people are Gnomes. Short little critters there. Now, if you want to PvP on Alliance, you want a gnome. There's 2 different ways you can go here. You can either choose Rogue, which is damage per second basically, or Warlock. Now, if you choose to level a Rogue or play a Rogue, you're going to find that you can hide from mobs, but you can also hide from players, which is really handy, again, when you PvP. Another benefit with playing a rogue is you can lockpick. So throughout the game you'll start getting little lock boxes that need to be unlocked, and these are the guys that will do it. Blacksmiths can always do it, depending on their skill, but we'll cover that again later. But yeah, rogues are good. The other class you can look at if you're going to be a gnome, is the warlock. Now, warlocks are spellcasters. They're damage per second and they can be quite handy. But for player versus player, if you see one of these, you pretty much want to run. They can do a lot of damage, and it's damage over time, known as dots. So they throw these spells at you, and that's it, you're a goner. These will damage your health over time, and if you can't get rid of these spells in enough time, you're dead practically. So yeah, these are pretty cool. Okay, next race of people, we have Night Elf. Now you only really want a Night Elf if you're looking at being a druid. The benefits of being a druid, you can choose to either be a tank, a healer, or damage per second. Now the idea of this is each of those that you choose, you're not going to be absolutely perfect at. There are better tanks and better healers out there, but you still have that option. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of players that make fantastic druids. So have a look at it, something you may consider. Another thing with druids, they get different forms. Now, if they're healers, they can turn into trees. If they're tanks, that's the bear form. Or if they're damage per second, that's the cat form. Another thing which is good with a druid is when you start to travel, you can usually get mounts and flying mounts, but druids, they're their own mounts. So when you reach level 30, you get your cat form and you can travel faster. And when you hit level 70, you can get your flight form. So you actually turn into a crow and you can fly, of course, which is pretty cool. Okay, moving along, we have dwarf. Now the best thing about dwarf is, of course, the hunter. Now if you want to be a hunter, this is the best race of people or characters to choose from. Now the idea of a hunter, they're just damage per second. They can tank, but they're not the best tanks. I don't know why people will even bother having hunter and tanking, but anyway. So these guys, at level 10 you will get your own pet, and I'll teach you how to do that. But you also get the choice of whether or not you are going to have a bow and arrow or a gun, where you can attack targets from a range distance, and your pet that you will train will hold the aggravation from that mob. So they're pretty easy to level. But let me tell you, if you are going to make a hunter, learn to control your pet. Nothing worse than being in an instance with a hunter that just doesn't know how to control the pet, and your party dies several times. It's really annoying. So there's the hunter. And last but not least, we have human. Now humans are good. If you have a human, you tend to have a bonus to reputation gains. You need reputation towards the end game. We'll explain that later on. Don't need to worry about it too much to start with though. Okay, and today we're going to make a paladin. Now, paladins, similar to druids, you can either tank, damage per second, or heal. Different way to play, completely up to you. Have a play around with it, something you want to do, by all means make one. Now, there's a few different ways you can do this. You can either be male or female, of course. You can randomize, which gives you different looks. And there we go. You could choose your skin colour, facial, the way the face looks, hairstyle, hair colour, and piercings. Now once you've decided on the way that your character would look, you then decide on a name. Now keeping in mind there are children playing this game, so try and keep it friendly. You will notice that all the good names are generally taken, so be creative, be nice about it. Once you have your name and it lets you accept it, then you can enter world.